Good evening, everyone. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you live. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if this is the first video you watch. I'm Johan, I'm your host, and the name of this channel is Make It an Amazing Day. Make it. It's your choice, it's your decision what kind of day you're going to have. And not just that, make it an amazing life. It's your choice, it's your decision what kind of life you're going to have. So why not have a good one? I have a saying that goes like this: I'm not perfect. However, I don't use my imperfections as an excuse for inappropriate behavior. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know, or you're aware, that I've been clean and sober and spiritual a little over 20 years. And I say spiritual because I was clean and sober for 13 years, from 1988 to 2001, but I wasn't spiritual. I could talk the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. When I came back to the AA program in 2004, I made some big changes. I made a lot of changes. And one of the most profound changes that later improved my quality of life was walking a spiritual path. What is spirituality anyway? I can only explain it this way. As I was going through the AA Big Book, there were sentences that jumped out at me. In that AA Big Book, they named certain people, like William James, who wrote a book called Varieties of Religious Experiences, and Carl Jung, who was a psychologist. And I heard things at meetings, heard things said that intrigued me. And I started not to take things at their face value just because so-and-so said it and he's emulated by the group. I can only suggest you Google what are spiritual ways, what is a spiritual path, what are spiritual principles, and what is a spiritual awakening. You see, this time around, after I came back in 2004, I went through the steps as honest as I could be, and I was thorough. Thorough. I call it a course now. I've mentioned before, if you're having problems with something and it's making your life unmanageable, take that course. The 12 steps. And where it says alcohol, you can substitute whatever it is that's troubling you. When I started to research the names from that big book, doctors, philosophers, psychologists, it expanded after a period of time, and I began to study ancient spiritual paths, ancient ways of life, and wisdom and philosophy from times of antiquity, like the Stoics. I guess I could have let it at that and just went around and told everybody that I read this book and I read that book, and I read hundreds of books. But the key for me this time was to take that information that I found in those books and apply it to my life. What works, I keep. What doesn't work, I cast aside. That doesn't mean I'll ignore them, because I found that those spiritual principles, those spiritual nuggets, those philosophical quotes, later on I picked them up and understood them because I matured spiritually. You see, my mind is always open now. I don't let my imperfections ruin my day, in the sense that if something happens and I act inappropriately, which is rare, I fess up to it. Maybe I said something to someone that later on in the day or the next morning in meditation, I thought, wow, what I said was uncalled for. So I owed that person an apology. We do things like this, flip out on other people, sometimes needlessly, because there's something else bothering us. And the other thing I found by practicing those steps in my daily life, that's called spiritual maintenance, is sometimes, maybe a lot of times, when we lash out at people, it's because they've done something to hurt our feelings. We get hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed, and we want to punish them. You don't want to fall into that trap, my friend, because after a while, people are afraid of you. They don't respect you. And in their eyes, you become a monster. My spiritual maintenance starts every day with prayer, meditation, and self-examination. Less prayers these days for myself, I might add, and more thoughts towards other people, especially those that are suffering. And I say those that are suffering because I learned from that AA book in those steps that other people like me are spiritually sick. You get to a point then and ask yourself the question, could a lot of what I've done been avoided? What I've done to other people to hurt them, to frustrate them, to disappoint them, and to annoy them? You see, when you're spiritually sick, that spirit inside you is dead. And I don't believe that we're born monsters. There are people, I'd say, that have glitches in the system, emotional or mental disabilities. That's different. They can't help it. But for the rest of us, as babies, we are born innocent. And we're curious. We're very curious. We become a product of our environment as babies growing up. And at this point in my life, having gone through a cleansing process, I don't hold any anger towards anyone that did me wrong. I want to emphasize one of the things I learned early on from my first sponsor about forgiveness. And he used to say, forgiveness simply means this: I won't retaliate. I won't retaliate, and I will forget about it. When you walk a spiritual path, and maybe there are people listening to this that could relate, sometimes you may be in a position, in a situation, and have an experience where you're hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed by another person. And you catch yourself in that moment when you're about to say or do something you shouldn't. You ask yourself, didn't I used to be that way? Isn't that how I treated other people? I'm not saying be a doormat. And if you listen to my videos, I've said it often. Sometimes you just have to walk away from some people. And not retaliate. How do I remain calm today in situations where I'm hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed? Well, I learned an answer to that riddle, to not retaliate. How to not seek revenge. How to stop punishing people when they hurt our feelings. It's also something I learned in a 12-step program from those steps. Step 10, to be exact. And as I mentioned, I do, at times, have some behavior, not often, that I question. Shortly thereafter, later in the day, or the next morning when I'm in meditation. You see, to have success when you're clean and sober, to have success is to become spiritual, to be as honest as you can be, because the truth is, no one is totally honest. That doesn't mean they're hiding something for nefarious reasons. They just might feel guilty about something or ashamed about it. Part of the spiritual maintenance in step 10 is, when I was wrong, promptly admit it. Now, if I remember correctly, it says in there, to myself first. Admit it to myself that I was wrong. And then admit it to your God, higher power, creator of the universe, Jesus, Yahweh, Allah, Muhammad. There are many names of God. And then admit it to another person. In my case, I was close to my sponsor, who was like a spiritual advisor. And at first, when I first started to live sober, I didn't know how. And I would get off course and do something really stupid. And my first sponsor would say, that wasn't very spiritual. Why'd you do that? Why did you do that? What were your motives? What were your motives? Punish somebody because they did something to you? That's pretty much a common reason for revenge. But then I learned something very important. That's a spiritual tool today in my spiritual toolkit. So on those rare occasions when my conscience is bothering me and I pinpoint why, I think about it and ask myself, do I owe someone an apology? If you're new in the 12-step program, I suggest you don't go out and start making apologies without talking to your sponsor or spiritual advisor or rabbi, priest, minister, or therapist. But I'm able to discern now where I went wrong, or what I did wrong, or what I said wrong. And I make an apology, an amends to that person, face to face, if possible. And then, when that's done, I go somewhere and I think about the situation again. I go over it again in my mind, and I ask myself, what could I have done differently to avoid what happened that unsettled me and was wrong or inappropriate? What could I have done differently? I'm out of the revenge game. I'm out of the being a monster game. I no longer flip out and get angry at people. I could walk away. I could even stay away. You could, if you're built this way, maybe you're able to tolerate people that disrespect you every day. I'm not built that way. So, rather than get tangled up in a tit for tat that could lead to something serious, I shut my mouth and walk away. Somebody once told me, and this came from that psychologist Carl Jung that was mentioned in the AA book, big book, that we don't like other people because we see something in them about ourselves. And that could be true. I just know arguing, carrying on, and looking for revenge, it's useless. When you're in the midst of drama and you feed it, when you're in the midst of drama and you feed that drama and you keep feeding it and you keep feeding it and you keep feeding it, it's like overfeeding yourself. You'll grow. You may grow to proportions that are unhealthy. But if you keep feeding that drama, it will make you sick. It'll hurt your heart. It will tear at your soul. If people you've gone to and made your amends to about past indiscretions, if that happened, let it at that. A lot of times you'll be in a situation that the person you go to make amends to also did something to you. But making amends isn't about pointing out their flaws. Making amends is the medication that you take to make yourself a healthy person, mentally and emotionally. We live in a strange world nowadays, and I can hear my grandmother, let her soul rest in peace, saying, "It's not the world, Johnny." She used to call me Johnny. It's not the world, it's the people in it. And to an extent, that's true. That's true. However, I feel people a lot younger than me have less discipline and less patience. Not all, but a lot. And people that are a lot younger than me, especially teens, they're easily influenced, right, by those things they see on the television and their cell phone. If you have a teenager and you've come to a conclusion that that cell phone is causing them problems, my heart goes out to you. I don't know how you stop that addiction. But getting back to what I just said is, they're easily influenced because their young minds have not developed. And also, it's important to take into consideration that teens are trying to figure things out. They're developing their personality. And a lot of times, their rebelliousness, well, don't take it personal. And speaking of taking things personal, that I learned a lot about that from a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. One of them is don't take things personal. I've recently been able to visit my 90-year-old mother in a nursing home. Maybe I was going every other day, pretty much like that. One morning I woke up and got a text message from my sister asking me how it went the day before. And then she said, I go 2 times a week. If you could do that, I'd appreciate it. And at first I was like, what the heck? But today I intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me. Intuition. So I decided to Google, is it dangerous to visit your elderly parent in a nursing home often? Yes. Yes. Or assisted living. My mother's in assisted living. But the answer is yes. And I was like, whoa, man. Especially in the beginning. Because there's a routine that those facilities have, that they have determined help a new patient get settled in. And they want to keep that routine. It's not that they don't want any visitors. And like Forrest Gump said, and that's all I have to say about that. Why didn't I fly off the handle when my sister sent me that text? I wasn't paranoid. I didn't take offense to it. I didn't take it personal, and I thought about it. And I got my answer. And guess what? I didn't even mention it to my sister. If it's obvious, it's obvious. Before I sit on my deck for 5 to 10 minutes in meditation, I started taking walks. Not long walks, short walks. I've had a tough year. I have Lyme disease. I have other physical problems as well. Degenerative disc in my neck with bone spurs, degenerative disc in my lower back with bulging disc and spinal stenosis. They said I have fibromyalgia. I don't know. Now, here's an honest appraisal. Long before I was in the 12-step program, clean, sober, then spiritual, I abused myself. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? In a lot of different ways. Do I have to go into detail? And now I'm paying the consequences. Not for the Lyme disease. That's not something I brought on myself. I was building a sacred grove in 2022 and got bit by a tick. But I have had a real issue this year with chronic fatigue. And I've had my blood work checked recently for testosterone levels, and it was discovered that my testosterone is dangerously low, a side effect of Lyme disease. So I'm going to get some medication for that, a gel. I like parties, not booze parties and those kind of parties anymore, but I like parties. Well, I should say it, I like to celebrate different things. I live alone, so I celebrate them with my dog, Ace. We have a party, maybe a pizza party or an ice cream party. He's in the other room. I know he just heard that and his ears went up. Pizza, ice cream. You know what kind of party I don't like anymore? Pity parties. Pity parties. If you're in a situation, you need to get the hell out of it. If you're in a situation, you need to get the hell out of it. I spend some time, less time now that the temperatures are like Arctic, down at my sacred grove. I spend less time now that the temperatures are Arctic, and my point is, and not just at the sacred grove, I love nature. I love to walk in nature. Always did, even when I was a kid. My mom used to joke, if you get killed, don't come home. Nature changes me emotionally, mentally, and physically. You know what I think about sometimes when I'm in nature? How my ancestors were. The Danes, the Vikings. They were in nature all the time. Had no choice. Lived in villages. And yeah, there was all that stuff, pillaging and things that many civilizations and societies have done for various reasons. But Vikings are farmers by nature. And they had sacred groves. That's why I built that sacred grove in the woods behind my house. They had sacred groves where they conducted business. Sat in silence with the gods. People that I knew 40, 45 years ago that were actually friends that I used to pal around with. Sometimes maybe I'm walking into a store or out of a store, they'll walk by. They're still doing their thing. Not my problem. But they don't even recognize me. I don't go up and say, "Hey, Bill, remember me? We used to party like motherfuckers." No, I don't do that. Some old friends have straightened their lives out. I turned 66 this past August. And I could say time's ticking away, but time started ticking away right after I was born. I'm just getting closer to that point. And I'm not afraid to die anymore. I'm not afraid to die anymore. And I've cleaned up the wreckage of the past to the best of my ability. And as honest as I could be. And because I'm able to admit when I'm wrong today, occasionally, I'm pretty sure on my deathbed, I won't have any regrets. I've tried and I did set right all the wrongs. I say try because some people aren't around anymore. Some people moved away. Going to some people might make matters worse to make amends. And some people just don't care what you're doing with your life. You hurt them in some way and they'll just never forget it. And maybe this might seem crass to you, but in my mind, people that still hold grudges against me from 40, 50 years ago, I just remind myself, like I said to you in the beginning, everybody's hiding something. Everybody's hiding something, and the difference is some people hide it better than others. That's it for this video. Make it an amazing day. Make it. It's your choice. It's your decision what kind of life you're going to have and what kind of day you're going to have. So why not make it a good one? Take that course. The 12 steps. Look at them. And whatever it is that is making your life unmanageable, put that in there in the place of alcohol. And read that book. The first 164 pages of that big book. Take from it what relates to you and just put the rest to the side, because you never know, one day you'll need that information. Keep your heart kind. Keep your mind calm and clear. I'll catch you in the next video. Hopefully. Have a good one.